This is going to be a loosey-goosey type of topic, but it's one of these things where when you go further down into the roots, or I guess you could say further up into the source, I don't really know what the proper terminology here is, but if you go further up the trade tree, it becomes very interesting to acknowledge where everything is coming from. Today what we're doing is talking about a potential fumble made by both the Detroit Red Wings and the Edmonton Oilers. Now, fumble, you could say, is a stretch, and you could argue as to whether or not this really is a fumble, because today we are talking about a prospect who turned into a stud, an absolute superstar in the making, who just signed a huge extension with the Minnesota Wild. We had talked about him in a few videos over the past few months here. Today we are talking about Brock Faber. Because when it comes to Faber, not only is he pretty much the best defenseman on the Minnesota Wild right now, 47 points, 82 games played in his rookie year with the club, at only 21 years old, securing the bag at $8.5 million a year till the end of 2033. But Brock Faber also, if you take a look at the path that he has gone down, was a part of a few organizations before being a Wild. For starters, he was drafted in the 45th overall spot in the 2020 draft by the LA Kings. He inevitably was traded over to Minnesota in the Kevin Fiala trade, and the rest is history. Man, could the LA Kings be in use of a 6'1", 201-pound right-handed 21-year-old defenseman like Brock Faber, who can score a whole bunch of points, who can PK, who can run a power play, and who can just be a minutes-eating defenseman. 27, 28 minutes a night you can play Faber, and he does not look out of place. But what if I told you there were two other teams involved in the Brock Faber story? The timeline, you could say. Because when it comes to Brock Faber, not only was he a draftee of the LA Kings, but it turns out that draft pick that the LA Kings used to select Faber wasn't even LA's in the first place. If you go over to the 2020 NHL Draft and you analyze the 45th overall pick, which the Kings used to select Faber, you would recognize that it actually belonged to the Edmonton Oilers initially. And of course, I get it, you could say that, oh, this is 45th overall. If the Edmonton Oilers had this draft pick, you can't guarantee that they would have taken a guy like Faber. It's absolutely not in the realm of realism, honestly, let alone possibility. By the time you get past, the top 10 of most NHL drafts, to be honest, it really becomes a crapshoot unless you're talking about guys that were absolutely supposed to go higher in the selections here. Brock Faber, anyway, was a guy whose rankings were all over the place. I mean, some outlets had him in the 30s, others had him in the 100s, so the LA Kings taking a swing on this kind of a guy at 45th overall certainly was a chance, and it's a chance that you could not say would have been duplicated by the Oilers had they had the pick. But if you just consider what Brock Faber is right now, and you ask the question, hey, how would the Oilers be if they had access to this dude on their blue line right now? Let alone the LA Kings who actually drafted him. What about the Oilers who initially owned the pick that was used to select Brock Faber? This is a guy who would be pretty much the second best defenseman on the team, or no, maybe third actually. He would be an elite second liner on that pair with Darnell Nurse, playing behind Evan Bouchard and Mattias Ekholm. Honestly, when you consider how good Brock Faber is, maybe Nurse and Faber would be pairing number one instead of Bouchard Ekholm, because those guys, Nurse and Faber, can both log 29 minutes a night and not break a sweat even. I mean, thinking about the agility and the endurance and the capacity of working that a guy like Faber has, that would mesh very well with what the Oilers would want to build on pairings outside of the Bouchard-Ekholm pairing. Brock Faber was already deemed by the Minnesota Wild to be providing $8.5 million worth of value. So if that kind of a guy was added to Edmonton, man oh man, what could have happened there? But of course, Edmonton isn't the only team we are talking about here. Because the Oilers, while they did have the pick that was used to select Brock Faber, they didn't actually trade it away to LA. The Oilers traded this 45th overall pick in 2020 to the Detroit Red Wings for Andreas Athanasiou, This trade was made on February 24th, 2020, and the Oilers unfortunately didn't really get much out of Andreas Athanasiou. I mean, he was an alright player heading into the Oilers system, but he didn't produce and he didn't really look all too good, and then he went to LA and he wasn't really good there either. I mean, he was fine in Chicago a few seasons ago, but that's besides the point here. Andreas Athanasiou was the prize, as the Oilers sent away the Brock Faber pick over to Detroit, but the Red Wings inevitably traded this pick over to LA because they moved down in the 2020 NHL Draft. On October 7th, 2020, the Wings sent this 45th overall pick to LA in exchange for 51 and 97 in the same draft. Yeah, note the October date of the draft, kinda crazy how everything was held on that month, but yeah, that's just kind of how COVID shut down everything and pushed the draft into the fall. But either way, Brock Faber and his draft pick was eventually used by LA after being acquired by Detroit and traded away once more. The Red Wings, if they had a guy like Brock Faber on their system, I mean, you think about the long-term projectability of a right-side D-core which includes Seider, Faber, and Axel Sandin Pellikka. You don't even need to play ASP on 5v5. You just give him every power play opportunity. Maybe he plays the full 2 minutes and he gets maybe 50 points a year doing that, while Faber and Seider are able to produce at 5-on-5. I mean, Faber can quarterback a power play if you really wanted him to do that. He's super versatile in all aspects of being a defenseman. That when you think about the additions there, I mean, add on Simon Edvinsson, add on, let's say, a William Wallander or whatever, and an Anton Johannesson, that's a really strong D-core. Not to say that it's not strong already without a guy like Brock Faber, but Faber adds so much value that it's kind of difficult to quantify. I mean, does Stevie Y even go for a guy like ASP in the 2023 NHL Entry Draft if a guy like Faber is in the system? The possibilities become endless, and you start to think, hey, there were 3 other teams that are linked to the Brock Faber story that all had a chance at potentially getting him for themselves, but all decided not to, either because they traded the pick away or because they just straight up traded the player away. And I'll end this video off once more by saying that it's not guaranteed in the slightest that if the Wings or the Oilers kept this pick, they would have taken a guy like Brock Faber, but to see that pick tossed around like a hot potato, eventually used to selecting one of the best young defensemen in the NHL in this generation's worth of play, that's crazy. The 2020 generation of players has been highlighted by a few guys stepping in here. Owen Power, Simon Nemec, Luke Hughes, but I think Brock Faber is the biggest steal out of them all, especially taken in the 45th overall spot, a pick that was initially held by Detroit and the Edmonton Oilers. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about how Faber would fare with either of these teams and the magnitude as to how big the screw-up really is. I think it's very easy to say it's not that great because, again, it's not guaranteed that if the Wings or the Oilers had this pick, they would have taken Faber, but still, the opportunity to draft this guy was at their fingertips, but they ended up missing out. I think if the Wings knew that Faber would have been Faber, they wouldn't have traded down in that 2020 draft and instead would have taken him. But of course, that's hindsight for you, baby. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about Brock Faber and his progression. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.